Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Make a Compelling Nonprofit Brochure with Adobe InDesign. I'm Nicole Jones. I'll be your host. I'm Director of Communications here at TechSoup. So we've got a lot of excellent content to cover today, but before we do that, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask them by placing them into the chat box. A reminder that all lines are muted. We won't be able to hear you. So again, if you have any questions, any technical issues that arise, you can place that into the chat box. And if you happen to lose internet connection, no worries. You can just reconnect using the link that's been emailed to you. And some other things, we've got always lots of great content through webinars, so you can find all upcoming and past webinars on the TechSoup website by going to techsoup.org/community/events-webinars. And then just the last couple notes here. You will receive an email with this presentation recording and links. And we always love to hear from you on social, so please tweet at us. We're at TechSoup, and you can use the hashtag TSWebinars. This webinar is brought to you by TechSoup. We are a global network bridging tech solutions and services for good. More than 1.1 million nonprofits in 236 countries and territories have benefited from TechSoup and recognize TechSoup as their unique resource partner. And we have to thank the support of more than 100 corporate donors who make this possible. This includes providers of software, hardware, and services who have chosen the TechSoup platform to create and grow impactful in-kind donation programs. You can learn more about all these great offerings that changemakers like yourself here on this line can take advantage of by visiting our nonprofit tech marketplace. It's at techsoup.org/get-product-donations. And we're going to send you all this via chat and in a follow-up email, so no worries about memorizing this. So I specifically want to call out the Adobe donation program and the offering there specifically around Creative Cloud All Apps Plan. We have 1-year individual membership and access to donated rates, admin fee of $5. And again, we're going to send you this via email, but since we are talking about InDesign, we just want to make sure you know what kind of offering you can access through our nonprofit tech marketplace. And also, we're more than just a tech marketplace. We also have lots of different programs. I'm just going to call out courses. We have an array of different courses from digital marketing, things like Google AdWords. We also have one specifically if you want to take your InDesign skills to the next level. We have one specifically on InDesign, and you get a discount 10% off. And I'm going to have a slide on that code, and we will make sure to include that in the follow-up email. So aside from courses, aside from our tech marketplace, we also offer online and offline communities to foster collaboration and peer learning opportunities. This, in addition to useful tech resources and tips through our blog, webinars, forums, and articles, in addition to our Apps for Good division. And this is where we collaborate with experts to create and curate relevant solutions that help communities around the world. And with that, it's time for introductions. So on today's webinar, we're joined by Wes Holing. He is the Senior Web Content Developer here at TechSoup. Again, he's joined by me, your host. I'm Nicole. In addition to Stephen Davidson, who will be helping to answer your questions along the way, and some other TechSoup friends who will be here to support you. So with that, I am pleased to hand it on over to Wes, who is going to walk you through making a finished print brochure using InDesign. Welcome, Wes.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Wes. If you have joined us for some previous Adobe webinars, my voice might sound familiar. I've hosted other webinars on Adobe InDesign, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop. We've also got a few courses that Nicole mentioned relevant to Adobe that I've participated in. So I'm really excited to be here to help kind of share the good news about Adobe, especially InDesign, an app that I really enjoy using. And for those of you who aren't familiar with InDesign, haven't used it before, maybe you're just attending this webinar to get a sense of what it is capable of. Today we'll be covering how to create a trifold brochure totally from scratch. I've written up some copy and got some images pre-selected, but the rest of it you'll be seeing me create along the way. Adobe InDesign is fantastic for obviously creating print documents like letters and brochures and postcards. It's also great for creating interactive documents, things that you might share, PDFs with other people, emailing them, sharing them on various digital platforms with links or visual assets, interactive features, all sorts of things, digital signatures. So it's more than just print. But today we'll just be covering print, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that there was more to it than just the print side. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here in a moment. What I'll be showing you is, again, how to start from scratch to create a trifold brochure. We'll go over laying out the document, working with color, formatting some text, inserting graphics, and then finally exporting it for print. These are things that you would touch on for InDesign with basically any print document. So we'll be covering all the basics. I can't imagine anything that we've left out that you wouldn't need the first time out, but there's still plenty more you can do with InDesign beyond that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and share my desktop here. And let me give you a quick preview of what it is we'll be creating in the end. Just like any good cooking show, I'm going to show you the finished product first and then walk you through how to make it. So this is a farmer's market, a fictional farmer's market that I invented. And this is the trifold brochure for it. So what we're seeing here on the right is if it were folded up, is the front of the brochure. The middle column here is the back of the brochure, and then the far left column is the first inside flap after you open it up. And then up here, we can see the inside of the brochure. If it were totally opened up, this is exactly how it would look, left, center, and right columns. So you can see there's some text along with colorful images. If we go back to the first view, we can see there's contact information there. We can find them on social. Don't bother trying to at that social account. It doesn't exist, but for the sake of our demonstration here, it does. A fictional location and then some hours that they operate every Sunday. So, of course, your brochure can include anything you want, other contact information, a map to where you're at, other information that's useful for your constituents. Of course, you may not necessarily be a farmer's market, but you can always package information about your mission, your constituents in this kind of this handy format that's great for putting out on tables at events, mailing it to constituents, donors, things like that. So let's go ahead and hop on over to InDesign and we'll get started on creating it. I'll just mention I'll be going, I'd say, just fast enough to keep up watching it, but probably too fast to do it alongside me. So what I would recommend if you want to try and create this on your own, maybe just come back once we've made this available to view later, and then you can pause and click and unpause as you need to. So let me resize my window. There we go. Okay. So let's create the document. The first thing, obviously, creating a new document. There are, as I mentioned, other documents that you can create with InDesign beyond just print. There are web options here. The InDesign comes with lots of built-in templates, which are really handy for creating all sorts of documents. If we look at the web ones, there are proposal layouts, storyboards, presentation layouts. For mobile, you can also create things like ebooks, which is, we've gotten a lot of use out of that here at TechSoup. If you've seen any of our ebooks, they're all created on InDesign. But for today's purposes, we'll just stick with print. So once we click print, we have a few presets up here at the top: letter, legal, just basic page sizes. And again, of course, templates down below as well, business cards and things. But right now, we'll just stick with the basic letter. I tend to work in inches. I'm from America. We still stick with that format. So I'm going to switch from picas over here to inches. My orientation, I'm going to switch to a landscape. If you think about the brochure, it's wide, it's not tall. So let's go ahead and click that. And again, we've got 11 inches by 8.5. I'm going to increase the page number to 2 because if you think about it, we're going to have a front side and a back side, and those count as 2 separate pages. I'm also going to uncheck facing pages. Facing pages is more for a document, like a book or a series of pages stapled together, where you may have, if you're imagining opening a book, you would have a page on one side and a page on the other. They'd be facing each other. That's not the case here with the brochure. This is a two-sided document, so I'm going to uncheck that. And then down here, we have an option for columns. Now, as you remember from the preview earlier, we have 3 columns, so we're going to increase that to 3. I'm going to set my gutter here to about 1/2 inch. And the gutter, which I'll show you in a moment if you're not familiar, is the space between the 2 columns. It's sort of a nice guide for make sure things don't butt up against each other. I'm going to set my margins here at, let's do a little less. We'll do 1/4 inch. The margins, of course, are the space on the page on the inside between the edge of the document and then the content of it. So your text doesn't go right up to the edge. And let's set a bleed here as well for maybe 1/8 inch. And the bleed, where the margin is the space on the inside of the page, the bleed is the space on the outside. If you're going to send your document to a professional printer, they're probably going to have these specs for you already. If you give them a call or you visit their website, a lot of times they'll say, here's exactly what we need. And the bleed is nice to have on your document because if you have an image or something colorful that goes right up to the edge, it allows there just to be a little bit to crop off so that you get that nice clean edge. There's no like little space between the edge of the document and your image. The slug we're going to leave blank. That's just the space for stuff you're not going to print. We're not going to have any of that. So what we can do before we click create is to click preview. And we can see the document before we created it. I'd say that looks pretty good. That looks like a nice brochure template. You can see there's the gutter here. There's the margin, and then there's the bleed. So I'll go ahead and click Create. So now we've got 2 pages. There's the second one, and there's the first one. So what I would recommend once you've created a basic document is to start adding your guides. These are an easy way for you to draw the elements on your page that you're going to add to the documents, your text, any graphics, anything else you might add. It's nice to have those guides along the way. If your rulers are not visible already, you can turn them on by going up to View. And then Hide Rulers is right here. Of course, mine are on, so the option is to hide them. If I hide them, the option is to show them, obviously. So I'm going to keep those on. I'm also going to make sure that I've got this view selected here. This is the typography workspace. InDesign comes with a lot of different preset workspaces that basically determine which options and panels are available to you. If I have Essentials, for example, you'll see there's fewer options. There's Properties, Pages, Libraries. If I choose typography, I've got different options: pages, layers, paragraph styles. You can create your own workspace along the way if you find that there's a certain set of views that you always need. You can save that, and then you always have that option if you want to switch to something for photography and then come back for typography. That's an option too. I like the typography one here because it's great for a print document. I can choose all sorts of things related to the text without having to go hunt for it. So with those enabled, I'm also going to confirm one other thing, which is up here in the View menu. In Grids and Guides, I want to snap to guides. So what those guides that I'll be creating here in a moment, this is a really nice feature that allows me to draw something, and InDesign will automatically attach whatever I'm drawing right to that guide. I'm not going to be off by 1/64 of an inch. This is going to keep it nice and tight right at the set guides that I've added. So with that added, let's go ahead and start adding some guides. The way I like to do it is to drag it right from the rulers into the document. So if I click, for example, here on the vertical ruler on the left and drag it over, you can see there's a line that's coming with it. I hope that's coming through on the webinar. So I'm going to add one right here in the center of the gutter. That'll allow me to know right where the fold is, and I can drag, I can add an image to go right against that line, not kind of near it or over it so that it looks weird when you fold it. This will be a nice clean line. And if you can see it as I drag, it snaps right to the center. That's another nice feature of InDesign, that I don't have to enter a specific manual value. I don't have to guess. It goes right to it's kind of like a magnet. the center of objects. If I drag to the center of the page, I get the same thing. So in this case, I'm going to drag one right to the center of that gutter. I'm going to do another one over here to this gutter, and repeat the process for the second page as well. There's one, and there's two. Okay, so we've got our vertical guides. Now, most of the time when you're creating a document, you're not going to know exactly where you want all of your guides. You may, if you've drawn it out or you're recreating something that somebody's created in the past, you may have the measurements exactly. You won't necessarily have that from scratch every time. I've already determined where I want my guides, and you can add them and change them as you go, but I'm going to add them right off the start here just for the sake of the demonstration. So I've already mapped out which ones I want. On page 1, I'm going to add, let's see, we'll do one at 1 3/4 of an inch. And here's another tip too. While I'm dragging this, I still have the mouse clicked down. If I hold down Shift while I do this, it snaps to every 1/8 of an inch, which is really nice for getting specific value. If I let go, you can see I can do 1.91 or something more specific. I just want 1.75. There we go, right at 1.75. And I'll do the same for the rest here. Let's do 3 1/4. And one at about 4 inches. And let's do one at 5 1/2, and another one at 6 and 6 1/2. Okay, so you can see these little thin lines that go across the page. These are our guides, and again, these are a nice way for me as the designer to know exactly where I'm going to be placing things against what dimensions on the page. And if we flip back over to our document here, you can see where those lines might be. The edge of the image here vertically is where I drew the first set of vertical guides. The lines across horizontally underneath the small producer section, above this great selection section. These horizontal lines map according to the lines I've created here. Of course, these ones go across the entire page. These won't be visible when you print. They're only visible within InDesign, but still a very nice guide for you as the designer to keep all of your images lining up at the same levels. So I'll go ahead and create some guides here for the second one as well. Let's create one at the 2 inch mark. And 3 3/4, 4 1/4, and 6 3/4. Okay, there we go. So we've got some more on that one. Let's go back up to our first page. Now, the next thing I would recommend once you've kind of gotten your layout set out, let's pick some colors. The nice thing about InDesign and basically a lot of the Adobe apps in the Creative Cloud collection is that you can specify what they call swatches, which is preset colors that you can just draw from as you create something. If I want to create a box on the page that's orange, or I want to create some text that's dark blue, I can set those colors out in advance. And then when I add those elements, I can specify, use that color orange or that color dark blue to draw from, and I don't have to keep specifying it each time. With some word processing applications, you might remember you have to change each bit of text, highlight it, change it, highlight it, change it. This is nice that you can just set it out once and then you're done. Or change it again later and affect all of them at once. Great time saver. So let's go ahead and hop over to our color palette. Here on the left, you can see there's the fill, which is the line, the white box with the line over it. There's the stroke, which is the one behind it. The fill is if you imagine dumping a paint bucket into a box, it's going to fill that content. The stroke is basically the border of any element. So we're going to set a fill here, double click it. And here we can set our color values. We have a lot of options here, RGB, which is red, green, blue. The lab colors here, which is a little different than anything that we're going to be working on today. But these ones here, CMYK, if you've ever worked with print, these letters should be pretty familiar. This is for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Yeah, I know black doesn't start with a K, but that's the way it is. And of course, if you have specific color values, you can enter them in any of these, but I'm going to be working with the CMYK because this is the color palette for print. RGB are values for on-screen, but CMYK is the print values. If you're working with a printer and they're asking what color you're looking for, always give them these values. That's the ones that they're going to expect, because if you enter it as RGB, it may not necessarily translate to the same value as CMYK. So everything I'll be talking today is just CMYK. All right, enough color theory. Let's add some colors. So I'm going to add 4 colors here. I've got a charcoal black, a dark blue, an orange, and a white. And I've got the values for those all ready to go. And of course, you can use the color space view here to fine tune your colors just as you need them before you add them to the swatches panel. But I already know ahead of time, so I'm just going to add these. So let's start with the charcoal. It's basically no cyan, magenta, or yellow. It's a lot of black, but not completely. So it's 0 for all those values and 80% for the black. That's, you can see right up here, it changed from solid black to a charcoal gray. I'm going to add the swatch for that one, and I'll show you where that ends up in a moment, but I clicked that for now. Let's go ahead and add dark blue at 40, 18, you can see it change as I go, 0, and 60. So there was that color. And let's do orange. And people who have a keen eye for TechSoup will realize that these are TechSoup colors. These are official brand colors. I am a company man, so I've got to use TechSoup colors for everything. Let's go ahead and add that one. That's orange. And then we'll add just a plain white, which is zeros across the board. And you can see it up there, white as it gets. All right, so we've added our swatches. Now if we come back over to the swatches panel here on the right, you can see these bottom 4 are the ones that I just created. But personally, I would never be able to pick those out of a lineup. I'm bad with distinguishing color, and these names don't give me a lot to go on. So what you can do is double-click the swatch. By default, it's going to name with color value. These are the same numbers I entered a moment ago. If I uncheck that, now I can give a human name. So I'll call this one charcoal, and I'll do the same for the rest of these. Let's say dark blue. Call that one orange, and guess what? Let's call this one white. Okay. So now we've got normal named colors that I can draw from. The next thing we're going to do, now that we've gotten our layout set and our color set, is we can create some paragraph styles. Now, as I mentioned before, with the swatches, you can set colors once and then use them throughout. You can, that same approach applies to a lot of things within Adobe products. You can create a paragraph style here that we can then apply to multiple text boxes later. Character styles are another way to do it. If I want like a certain type of text to say it's blue and it's bold, I can set that ahead of time and then just call that up later. So by default, every piece of text on your document fits this basic paragraph style. You can't change the name. It's always there. And this is the default that all text draws from if you want it to. So if I double click it, I get this panel. Again, you can see there's no way to rename it, but we can set some other default values that are going to be kind of handy later on. We'll go ahead and head over to basic character formats, and I'll pick a different font. Minion Pro is the default, but I like something nice and familiar like Helvetica Neue. Let's go with that one. And let's say we'll keep the font size at 12, but we'll change the leading to 15. Now the leading, if you look at any piece of text that's got more than one line to it, any paragraph, you'll notice that there's a little tiny space between the 2 lines of any paragraph. That's the leading. You can specify really tight text or really wide text, lines spread far apart, and that's what this value controls. And you can always come back and change it later. I like just a little bit more than the default, so I set that at 15. One other quick note too about fonts here. With Adobe Creative Cloud, you also have access to Adobe Typekit, which is a great way to add fonts to your library. It's connected right to your Adobe Creative Cloud account, so if you want to go beyond what's just on your computer by default, you can always get more fonts from Adobe, and they're always synced to wherever you have your Adobe account too. So really nice feature there as well. I found a few great fonts that way. Let's go ahead and head over to indents and spacing. We're going to add a little bit of space after each paragraph. I'll do another 1/8 of an inch. And again, looking at a document where you've got multiple paragraphs, this is not the space between lines. This is the space between paragraphs. So you always want more space between paragraphs than you do between lines, because if they're equal, well, then it just looks like a run-on block of text. And this will kind of give some nice breathing room to the copy that you've written. So I'd say about 1/8 of an inch is probably pretty good considering everything else we've added here. I'm also going to turn off the hyphenation. This is on by default. This is great for like books, long form content, but not so much for a brochure where it's just tight text. I don't want to break words in half and then continue on a second line. And then last thing will come down here to the character color. And this is where we've entered those swatches. This was the nice thing about doing this ahead of time. I can come in and choose them here. I can always go back later if I have a color I want to add that I haven't added to the swatch, but now I can, and just choose charcoal. So that's my basic paragraph. That's the default for all the text that I'm going to add. But I know I'm going to need more than that. I'm going to be putting, if we go back to the preview here, I've got some text that's against a colored background. I've got some headers. These are all different sizes and colors. So let's add some more paragraph styles that we can draw from. Rather than create it all again from scratch, what I can do is right-click it and then duplicate the style. Now I've got a copy of basic paragraph. I'm just going to call this one basic paragraph light. This is nice that I can change the name of this one. Of course, basic paragraph is always called that, but I can call this whatever I want. That's familiar. And I can base it on something else. Basic paragraph is the other option right now. But what this does is it inherits all of the properties from basic paragraph. So I don't have to set those things out again. And whatever I change on basic paragraph, unless it's overridden in this copy, is going to come with it. You can see the style settings here are just the basic paragraph. It's the same style as the one before. The only things I'm going to change with this one are the character color. Set this one to white. Now it's the same as paragraph, but in white. Let's just add a couple more here. We'll create a new one from scratch. You can click this Create New Style here to create a new one. I'm going to drag it to the bottom just to keep them all organized. And I'll double click it again, give this a name. Let's call this header. This will be the header for those text blocks that I pointed out. Let's base it on the basic paragraph again. And actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and pause here for some questions. I think we might have a few coming through on the chat.
Yes, Wes, we've got a couple questions that have come in. One being, will the colors that you added to the swatch stay even for future projects?
That's a really good question. They will stay within the document. After you save it, you can always come back and pull them out. If you have, for example, with TechSoup, we have maybe a dozen or so brand colors that we always draw from. We're going to put them in every document, in every web project, in every illustration. We don't want to just have to recreate them and re-add them to swatches every time. The really nice thing, and I'm going to cancel this here and come back to it, is that there are also Creative Cloud libraries. You can create a library that's associated with your account, add all the swatches you want to it, and even in other elements too. If I want to add a logo to it, I can include that in my library. That's always going to be available in any project, across any Adobe document that you're creating. And what's nice is you can also share that with other people who have Adobe Creative Cloud as well. So our entire design team uses the same Creative Cloud library to draw from all the brand colors. They don't have to create them every time, and it's a lot handier.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Just a couple more questions here.
Sure.
One being, you don't use grid lines for the whole page. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's just kind of a personal preference. I know we've got another in-house InDesign expert who swears by them. In the case of what we're doing here, I don't prefer them just because we're going to have such a short amount of text. If it's a longer document, then I might rely on those a bit more. But that is a really good point. I would highly recommend if anyone's going to be working with longer form text to check out the document grid lines too.
Great. And one other question here. Do you recommend designing the outside or inside page first?
Oh, that's a good question. In the case of the brochure, probably best to do the outside first just because that's going to sort of set the stage for the content on the inside. Whatever the best image you have of the work that you're doing going right on the outside kind of informs the rest of the inside. So in this case, I'm doing the opposite. I'm doing what I would not recommend doing, which is starting from the inside, but that's just because I want to kind of show the basic layout for the inside, which is the most repeatable parts of this brochure, and then we're going to come back to the outside, which is sort of the less the more unique parts of the brochure. So, but that's a really good question. I would say probably start with the outside. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and keep going here. I'll head back to my my header. So what I was doing here was creating another paragraph style just for headers. the precede paragraphs in the document. So let's call this one header dark blue and set the paragraph style to be based on basic paragraph so I inherit all those properties that I've already applied. I'll head over to the basic character formats again. As you can see, there's Helvetica Neue, there's the 12 and the 15. Those are all from the original, but I'm going to change a couple of these. Let's set the header style to be 15 point size, and let's do 19 for the leading. We want the headers to be a little bigger, to be, to be more skimmable, so we want that to be a bit bigger than 12. And let's also set, the font style to bold. We really want to stand out. Let's set the character color here as well. I want it to be a different color so it kind of sets off with the eye. We'll pick that dark blue that I made earlier, and we'll click OK. And then the last one here is because I have text on a colored background, I want a white version of this as well, so I can just duplicate this like I did before. I'll call this one header white. I'll base it on header dark blue to get all of the same properties once again. Choose the character color. This time I'm picking that white that I picked before. There we go. Now I have paragraph styles that I can draw from for all the text in my document. And if I need some later, I can always create more, duplicate something, have a slight variation, all of that. So let's go ahead and start drawing some frames. One thing that everybody should consider when it's their first time out with InDesign is that it works a little differently than, for example, a word processor that you might have been familiar with. The way that InDesign works is that everything is based on, all the elements on the page are based in frames. If you imagine an actual picture frame and then the picture behind it, it's blocking off the visible area of whatever it is you're adding. If you want a color block, if you want text, if you want an image or a photo or an illustration, whatever, it's all going to exist within a frame. And I'll show you a bit more about how that works. But for right now, what we can do is just draw some empty frames. And it's going to look a little weird at first, but I think you'll see where I'm going once I get started. You can do that by clicking this rectangle frame tool over here, or just pressing the S key. And I'm going to start drawing some of these boxes basically into each column. So let's go ahead and create the first one here. And this is, you can see where these guides come in at. This is snapping right to the ones that I've created before. So I've created this one here that goes from the top left edge and then down to about the 3 1/4 inch mark. And let's create another one that's about 2 3/4 inches tall. There we go. And you can see it's snapping right to the guides that I've drawn and that already exist on the page. And the last one here at the bottom is about 2 1/2 inches tall. All right. And let's do another one here about the same size as the first one. Again, this is going to be the inside of the trifold. So I'm just drawing out boxes for text, for images, things like that. I didn't quite hit that one, so let's undo, and I'll get right on there. Now it's already snapped to it. And let's do 2 1/4 on this one. And we'll do a 3-inch box here just to finish out the rest of the column. And then for the third column here, I know this is kind of the tedious part, so bear with me, but let's go ahead and draw out another 2 1/4 inch box. And let's do a 2 1/2. And this final one is just a couple of inches high. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we've got obviously a lot of lines going on, and sometimes it can be a little visually loud, I guess, for a designer. You can also turn off a lot of these lines as you go, just if you want to see it sort of in a more natural state. If I want to turn off the guides, I can do that by coming back up to Grids and Guides under the View menu and hiding the guides. Or I can just do Command on a Mac or Control on a PC with a semicolon. That'll show and hide those, which is kind of nice. I can also hide those frame edges. As you can see here under View, Extras, there's a Hide Frame Edges option. For Mac users, it's Control Command H. For PC, I think it's Control Shift H. Don't quote me on that. But I can turn those on and off as well. So now I'm just looking at the guides, not the boxes of the other frames I've drawn. So I'll turn those back on. And let's go ahead and draw the frames for the second as well. Do one at 375. Another one just to round out the rest of the column here. Do a big text box on this section. 4 3/4 inches. Let's do another short one up here at 2. Oops, missed the guide. Try that again. 2. And let's do a 4 1/4. And then one little one for the bottom. This is where we'll put like social media info. The next one here at 4 1/4. This will be our big front image. I'm missing the guides. There we go. And this will be where our logo goes. And then one at the bottom just for a little slogan. Okay. So I've drawn all of those out. And again, you may not have these dimensions right off the bat. You might have to play with it a bit as you design. You can also, of course, draw it out first and then measure out what you've drawn, which is kind of a nice way to do it. It saves you a lot of guessing and checking. But now we've got a very basic layout. Let's go ahead and insert some images. I'll make a quick plug here as well. In addition to all the apps that come with it, Adobe Creative Cloud, you also have access to Adobe Stock, which is a separate subscription, but it gives you access to a lot of really high quality stock photography. I believe, and I think I got this right, it's $29.99 a month. The first month is free and you get access to 10 assets per month. An asset, of course, is something like a photo, but can also be stock video. So those are kind of nice assets to draw from if you're creating something like an annual report, something where you really need some strong visual images, or of course a brochure. But of course any image will work here, but I thought it was worth mentioning if we're already in an Adobe product to cross-promote. So let's go ahead and start adding some images. Let me grab my guide here so I know exactly where I'm adding it. Let's go ahead and start adding this box here. If I click on the frame that I've drawn, I can hit File and Place, or Command-D on the Mac, Control-D on the PC. And I can just choose the image that I want to include. Let's go with the farming one there. Okay, so that doesn't look great. It's way too zoomed in, but this is where the real value of the frame setup comes in. If I zoom out on this with Command minus or Control minus on the PC, you can see the image is taking up the space within the frame. There's also this circle in the center with a hand cursor when I drag over. If I click that, you can see that large box around it. This allows me to change the scale of the image that's within the frame. So if I click and drag one of the boxes, you can see I can move it. I can also do, I can hold Alt and I'll center the position that I'm dragging it around. And if I also hold Shift, it will keep that same aspect ratio so nothing gets distorted. So let me zoom that way in. There we go. Now that looks a little better. Let's zoom in as well. There we go. So that's actually, I can see what's going on. It's actual farming. It's not just a picture of a carrot, which is much better. Let's go ahead and add a few more of these, and we'll be doing some of the same things. Let's pick one with some jams up here at the top. And the same thing, I'm going to zoom out so I can grab the frames. Zoom in, we'll get some nice jams. And of course, you can see the outside of that image, all of it doesn't show within the frame, which is nice. We can crop it to where we want and change it later. It's non-destructive editing is what they call that. Let's go ahead and add a few more here. Let's pick the one at the bottom. That's some nice flowers, because that's what our farmers market also includes, not just food, but flowers too. And let's place some happy shoppers up here. And it's worth pointing out too that the reason that these images, the bounding box for the image is so far out is because these are high resolution images. If you have smaller ones, they're going to appear smaller, maybe not print quality, but a high resolution image you should always rely on for anything print. The guideline there being about 300 dots per inch or better. So make sure you've always got something, the originals if you take photography. If you're taking the photos yourself, always use the originals, not the sort of resized ones for maybe for web use. And we'll go ahead and add a nice family photo because our farmers market is very family friendly. There's a dad and his son picking up some fruit. And let's go ahead and add some images down here at the bottom as well. Let's pick the colorful foods here. This, of course, will be the inside the first inside flap after you open from the front. And we'll pick another photo here for the back. It's just kind of fun. There's a kid selecting some vegetables. Size that one down a little bit. Oops, dragged it too far. Try it one more time. I'll grab that and I can position him as well after sizing it too once I click and drag that center circle. And lastly, let's go ahead and add a farmer at the market here. She will be the face of the farmer's market, working with the community. There you go, I think she's handing out some radishes. I've also created a logo for the Mooresdale Farmers Market, which I'm going to add here in this box. Of course, I've created it in Illustrator. You can use whatever format you want. You don't have to use just a JPEG or anything. If you created assets within another Adobe application, you can import them here as well, like this. So I've got an Illustrator file that's just called logo, and I can do the same thing as I did with the others. And I'll zoom that way down. That's about good. I had a little more time on my finesse it, but let's stick to adding them for now. So what I mentioned before, though, about the bleed is really crucial here. These frames that I've drawn go right up to the edge of the document, but if a printer is creating this for me, putting it through the big machine, this is going to lead to potential errors when it comes to actual print. So what we do is we can just drag this frame right to the bleed. Oops, rotating it instead. Let's try that again. Right to the bleed on the document. These are the guides that I set out from the beginning. I can do the same for these up here, and this will just make sure that everything comes out nice when it gets printed. They just crop right off the edge, parts of the image that we don't need, but we don't miss anything. There's no white space or anything else. And I'll do this with the last one here. There we go. So now all of our images go right to the bleed, which is great. Let's go ahead and add some splashes of color too. I'll add some additional boxes. Let's add one down here. And I'll set this to orange, right from my swatches panel, which is nice. Right now, this object, this frame, is above the text box that I'm going to add later. So let's go ahead and we can send it backwards, which means it'll go all the way, it'll go one step down, or I can send it all the way to the back, which basically, if you think about a stack of papers on a desk, this is sending it below the bottom to the bottom of the stack. So let's go ahead and send it to the back, because I want my text box to appear over this orange box. And we'll add another one. Let's do it in the center here. Make that one orange. And I'll send it to the back. And let's add a couple more here on the other side. And these ones I'm starting right from the bleed. I think I missed the edge on that one. Try it one more time. Zoom in and get right on it. Send that one to the back. And the same for this one as well. There we go. Sent to the back and set it as orange. Okay. So now that we've got our graphics set, basically we've added all of our images, our color blocks, and our logo, let's go ahead and add some text. What I can do is select several objects at once. If I click this box up here, I hold Shift and then click the next one down, the center one, upper right, and lower right. Now I've selected multiple objects, multiple frames. And I can, up here under Object, I can convert this content to text. Right now, it doesn't know what it's going to be. This is me telling InDesign it's going to be a text type of object, which gives me additional options that I wouldn't have otherwise. So you can see those X's in the box disappeared, with the exception of the ones that are the color box behind the text. But for the ones in these upper corners and the bottom right, the X is gone because now those frames are text objects. And I'll do the same down here. Select all 4 of those, holding Shift and clicking, and then I can convert from graphic to text. Okay, so now I have some options. Selecting those same text frames again, if I go back to the object menu, I've got text frame options. This was not an option before because these weren't text frames. Now they are. And what I can do from here is really handy. With one setting, I can change what they call inset spacing. And that's basically just a fancy way of saying the margin within the box, the text frame box itself. And you can see them start to appear here already. There's this thin frame within each box now. And this will keep the text from going right up to the edge of the document without me having to worry about where the margins are and everything. And if you think back to our initial settings, we had a 0.25 inch margin, which is nice. So I've set those to be text. I set the inset frames on those, and I'll do the same for these as well. I can right-click on them instead of going up to the menu as well. Back to text frame options. Set those ones at 0.25. And there is a sneaky way to do this for all text frames going forward, but we don't quite have the time for me to show it to you today. But just know that it is an option along the same lines as creating paragraph styles and character styles. So I've set all my text frames out. I'm going to head and cheat here and just copy and paste some of this text in. I can just do that by double-clicking and pasting. It doesn't look great, but we'll tune that up in a minute. So I can paste this one down here. Nothing like spending a Tuesday afternoon watching a guy copy and paste. All right, almost done with our copy and paste job. This is our big box here. Put our location info at the top of the back. Maybe some social info down here. And our cute slogan underneath the logo where it belongs. Okay, so we've got text. It doesn't look great. This is the default. But what we can do is set out our paragraph styles we created oh so long ago. So let's go ahead and click all of these, and again, holding down Shift to click each text frame, click all the ones in the white spaces, and we'll click Basic Paragraph, and you can see now they look better. We've applied that charcoal gray. The orange ones are still yet to be done, but let's go ahead and finish with the white box first. So we'll click that one and hold Shift and click this one as well, and Basic Paragraph. Okay. Let's fix this too so that there we go. Okay, now let's get really clever with some of the text treatment here. We'll click the ones in the orange boxes. We'll do white paragraph. Same thing down here. And I don't like having a full paragraph space, so if I delete that carriage return, hold Shift and press Enter, it'll just do a type break, which I think looks a little better. And then the last thing, paragraph styles don't have to apply to an entire text frame. You can also do it just a part of a text frame. So in this case, if I select the whole header section and then click Header, it just applies to that. The rest of this, if I click into the paragraph, you can see it's still basic paragraph. So you can mix and match within a text frame too, which is kind of handy. So I'm going to apply that to these other ones as well. Our wide variety, okay. And then we'll do the same for the sections here in the orange boxes. And what I'll even do, just like in a word processing document, if you want to change, without using the paragraph styles, if you just want to change little bits, I can change this, this location here by clicking character and just choosing to override it with bold, for example. So these really stand out. Oops. These are kind of mini headers in a way. I'd also like to change one other thing about this, which is the alignment. I think this looks better if this were vertically centered, so I can go back to my text frame options by right-clicking, hitting text frame options, and changing here vertical justification, align to center. Now you can see it drop right down. I can also change up here in paragraph, change this to be centered, which I think looks a little neater. It'll also give me some space for some social icons. I'll do the same for this one as well. So I think I've got a pretty good layout here. I can also add, just like before, I can go back up to File and Place. I can drop in a few social icons. I want to be modern and trendy, so let's go ahead and add for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And what it gives me is the option here to place these 3 images. And you can see there's a little 3 in parentheses where my cursor is. I can drop these anywhere, but once I click one, it'll prompt me to add the next one and the next one. So if I click out here, there's a big Facebook, there's a kind of big Instagram, and there's a medium-sized Twitter. And if I start to resize these now, what it'll do is it'll change the frame on them. So if I click up to auto fit, that'll change the image along with the frame, which is really nice. I can click and drag, just like I did with the other options, to, you can see the box moves. I already know what size I need, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip to that and say it's about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to do the same for these ones. Again, click auto fit, 3/4 of an inch, auto fit, 3/4 of an inch. All right, let's go ahead and drag these in place. Want Twitter there, Instagram there, and Facebook about there. And the little guides that I have on InDesign are kind of guiding me to where it lines up with something else on the page, which is really nice. But that's it. That's our brochure. The last thing to do is just to export it. Of course, we want to send it to our printer. Up under File and Export, you're going to get a whole lot of options. Let's call this one Brochure Webinar, so creating a separate one. There are some presets that are handy, like a high-quality print, which is, of course, going to go to your printer to create it. There's a lot of other options here for marks and bleeds and compression for images and output, and all these color conversion palettes, things like that. All of this stuff, any good printer will just tell you what it should be. So you don't have to worry and try and guess and make sure it comes out normal. They can tell you that oftentimes on their website or just with a quick phone call. And you can just punch them in right here. And then a quick export will have produced. Let me try that again. Let me open it with Reader. And we can see, just like the demo, there is our brochure in 3 columns with full color glory, ready to be put out on a table or sent by mail. So there's your brochure in about 40 minutes. I hope that wasn't too fast, but I just wanted to leave a little time for some questions here, and I'm going to throw it back to Nicole to see if we have any questions about what we've done today.
Fabulous. What a beautiful brochure. Thank you, Wes, for walking all of us through that. So we do have some questions. Why don't we start with this one? First of all, maybe this is a simple one. Does the program autosave at regular intervals, or is that the responsibility of the creator?
That's a good question. We've all been bitten by that before, and of course, you'll careful eyes will notice I didn't save at all, which is really bad. It does have an autosave periodically. If your computer completely crashes, you come back, it'll prompt you to use a recovered version. It might not have up to the last second changes, but it will be pretty good. All that said, always save your documents. Do as I say, not as I do.
That's right. We have all been there. So let's see. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A box, and we will be sure to flag them. So on to our next question. If you have too much text for a frame, can you show us how to continue the text into another frame?
Yes, great question. Let's go ahead and try that here. I'm going to delete the text out of this box so we've got somewhere else to drop it in. If I have, if I press return here, I can start typing more, and you'll see these characters. But after a while, there's nothing. Now I typed more beyond the space that's available. If I click elsewhere or hit escape, these changes are accepted. You can see now there's this little plus sign here at the bottom right. What I can do is I can click that, and you can see I get this little chain with some text that's right behind it. And if I click into another frame, oh, where'd it go? Oh no. It is connected. Oh, it's right, because it's white, of course. If I change my paragraph style to something else, you can see both of them. Oh no, I picked a bad example. Let's try this one more time. I'll do it from this one to this one. If I just shrink this one up, it's too far. Let me try it. Here we go. There we go. Now you can see these two are connected. There's a little arrow pointing to the right, and it's connected here. I could even continue the text on from here as well to a new box. If I click and just click outside, I create a whole new box, or I can connect it to a different text frame.
There we have it. All right, the questions are pouring in. On to the next. Why export instead of save as PDF?
Oh, good question. The export, maybe this is just a habit, but we have options here for interactive and print. We have a lot of other file formats as well that aren't necessarily available under the file save as, and I'll just hop up to save as to give you a quick look. What we have here are basically just InDesign specific formats. So the design itself, you can create a template, or you can create, or you can save it as a format that's compatible with older versions of InDesign. But you'll notice PDF is not included here. InDesign works with the sense that you're creating an InDesign document that is then sort of universally exportable. You can create it. You can export it as a JPEG or an HTML file, or of course a PDF, and that's where the export comes in handy. Is that with that I can then send it out to be a PDF or something else that other people can use if they don't necessarily have InDesign.
All right, we still have time for just a couple more questions here. A reminder, any questions you might have, you can go ahead by typing them into the chat box. All right. How come you just don't click on the image and choose Fit to Box?
I think you've caught me with not knowing something. So congrats to the person that suggested that. I didn't know that was a feature. So I apologize for you having to watch me resize every image when there was something easier to do. But yeah, good tip. I didn't know that one.
There we go. The teacher has been taught. All right, let's see here. Could you duplicate the page after you set the guides?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I didn't do that here, of course, is we had different guides for the 2 pages. But if I had, sort of a master page that I could then create all these other ones, there's a couple of ways to do that. But if you look under the pages panel here, you can see there are masters where you can add things like guides that are then applicable to multiple pages. If I had maybe 10 pages here, I could apply the same master to all of them and they'd all get the same guides. I could also just right-click on a particular page, or in this case a spread, and duplicate it, getting everything that comes with it, including the images, the guides, all of that. So there's a couple of ways to do it depending on your needs. The master is nice if you've got a long document and you might have multiple types of pages, maybe a cover page and a section break page, and then just a standard page inside. Whereas in this case, you may just want to duplicate a single page to do maybe a comparison of 2 individual pages. But yeah, those are definitely 2 ways to go about it. And I'll just add that duplicating the master, you can also bring in things like text and graphics along with it.
All right, thanks, Wes. And I see a lot of questions here. I don't think we'll have time here to get to all of them, but we will do our best offline to respond. Last question. Are there any good rules around white space versus text?
Oh, yeah. Good rules. I would say this is me admitting my own guilt. I often put things too close together. I think I did an okay job with this one, but I would say it's kind of, for me, it's more of a rule of thumb, just making sure that the spaces that you're using are consistent. In this case, using the same space between paragraphs. If you look down here at the bottom, the space here is 1/8 of an inch. I've used a 1/4 inch for the margin and for the inset spacing on the text frame. So just kind of numbers that are somewhat divisible by each other is kind of a good rule of thumb. And then also just making sure that you've got enough room for things to breathe, that things don't look like they are smacked up against each other. In this case, they kind of are, but that's just because we've got a fold in the way, so they're not really, so tight against one another. But yeah, I'd say, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/8 of an inch, things like that are really good, just rules of thumb for white space.
All right. Thank you so much again, Wes, for answering those questions, and of course to all of you on the line for asking some really great questions, even teaching Wes a tip or two along the way. There's always so much to learn when it comes to Adobe products, and I'm going to share some additional resources in just a moment here. Just going to jump ahead. So we always love to learn just one thing that you walked away with from this webinar, one thing you learned today. So if you can just share that in the chat box, that helps us understand what kind of core content really resonated with you, and also helps us improve webinars as well. Something else that helps us improve our content is by completing our post-event survey. And also don't forget to follow us on social media and visit the TechSoup blog for more resources. And stay tuned for this upcoming webinar. On the 22nd, we have a webinar called What Giving Tuesday Data is Telling Us About Effective Fundraising. We also have some upcoming Facebook live streams on cybersecurity. You can find that on our community events page below, where we also have archived webinars. And we also have another one on impact investing, which will feature Ken Sonoda. He is Vice President of Development here at TechSoup, in addition to someone who leads impact investment at Kiva. So it's going to be a really great conversation. Stay tuned for that. And as promised, some more resources for yourself and for your organization. So TechSoup Courses is a fantastic place to dive into this detailed content even further. So it's a social learning platform that provides nonprofits and libraries with just-in-time solutions-based training, and that includes things from digital marketing like Google AdWords, social media, tech training, in addition to, of course, InDesign. So we do have a 10% off TechSoup course discount code. It's for a course of your choice by using this code here. It's FY20WEB10. And again, we'll send you that in a follow-up email. And some specific courses I'd like to call out. Let's see, so we've got these Adobe ones on Photoshop 101. We've got Adobe Absolute Beginners. So I know some people ask, I don't really have the technical skills to do this. I need some more hand-holding. This is the one for you. It's creating a fundraiser invitation using InDesign. Another Absolute Beginners on getting started with Illustrator. So these are great resources. Again, as a webinar participant, you get that coupon of 10% off on any of these courses here, and you can use that at checkout. And we've also included here a link to our Adobe catalog, so where you can find great offers on Adobe licensing fees, specifically Creative Cloud. So please check that out. Again, we'll include this in the follow-up email, so you've got it all at your fingertips. And with that, I'd like to thank you again. Thank you to Wes for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another TechSoup webinar. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.